Hi, I'm Jane McCallion.
And I'm Adam Shepherd.
And you're listening to the ITPro Podcast, where this week we are talking about bots.
Bots are the vanguard of the AI revolution. From telephone banking to making purchases online, bots can help answer our basic questions or channel our request to the appropriate department. In essence, their presence makes things faster for the customer and the company they're trying to contact.
Despite all this, almost everybody has one, if not several, stories of frustrating encounters with bots that either make things more difficult, didn't understand the request, or just cut you off. So are bots really the future of customer service, or just a new source of customer frustration?
So, before we get into this discussion, I think it's worth talking about what a bot actually is, because I think the definition can vary depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, that is a good point. For me, they are customer service, automated customer service things, for want of a better way of putting it, or automated customer service software. So that could typically be online. That's the ones that I think most commonly referred to as bots. They're chatbots. That occasionally present themselves as a person. Sometimes they're a bit more honest and like, hello, I'm a robot, come to help you. But I would also put automated telephone things into that, like when you call up and you have to go through automated, giving information.
Automated
and saying what you want.
receptionists.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Because they're doing the same thing and probably using largely the same back-end software or like the same idea of it. But you're just using your voice rather than your fingers.
I think that's a pretty solid working definition because while the word bot often implies some kind of level of machine learning or artificial intelligence, really a lot of chatbots in particular are essentially just kind of fairly rudimentary decision trees that are kind of dressed up in a slightly more presentable user interface. So, for example, there's a pretty wide gulf between, automated receptionists and kind of answering services and something like, the Google Assistant or Alexa. So, for the purposes of this conversation, we will mostly be talking about kind of chatbots, the stuff that you're likely to encounter on a day-to-day basis when kind of talking to, big brands or, tech companies, that kind of thing, rather than, anything with a large kind of AI component.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that bots haven't exactly covered themselves in glory in the in the time that they've been deployed. Now I know you've had some particularly shocking experiences with bots recently.
Yes, this story combines one of the most common scams that people are now coming across with bot frustration. I received a text message from the delivery service Hermes on a day that I was expecting a delivery from them, saying that I'd missed my delivery despite the fact that I was in the living room. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened. The place that I live, not all maps kind of get it. Stuff frequently goes to neighbours across the road or down another street. Occasionally gets lobbed over the fence, whatever. So this was not the first time this has happened. You've got to be careful whenever you get a text message along these lines. So I tried entering the tracking number that I'd received from the company that was sending me my delivery into the Hermes website, but it didn't recognize it for whatever reason. And then I saw, when I'd clicked on the link in the text message, that I had a different reference number. But this is also not entirely unknown. So I tried that one. No, it didn't recognize that one either. Great. Okay. And I thought, I'm just going to check this. So first of all, I engage with the chatbot that pops up on the Hermes website. Can I help you? And I just tried various ways of kind of going, my delivery has been missed. I need to talk to a human, this, that, and the other. And just the decision tree for this particular bot didn't know how to answer these questions, didn't want to answer these questions, nothing. And after about 3 failures, I was like, I'm going to call the telephone line because that's normally the way to deal with it. the way to get a human. Called the phone number and just kept being booted off towards the bot, which led to increasing levels of swearing and frustration.
Mhm.
And so I decided to enter the details via the link that I'd been sent, name and address and blah, kind of quite normal stuff. And it was when I got onto the second page where it told me that I had a £1.75 redelivery charge due, and could I just enter all the details of my credit card here, please? I realised,
Mhm.
oh no, this is a scam. This is a scam. The whole thing is coincidental that these two things are lining up, because I'd had a whole bunch of scam text messages before from various companies that allegedly from Royal Mail or DHL or whatever, and it's not, because I'm not waiting for anything, and they're very upfront about kind of like, you need to pay £5. I'm like, no, I don't need to pay in for anything. But for me, I'm kind of relatively savvy, although I went one step into this chain of handing over all my information.
Mm.
It worries me that other people, when they're interacting with a bot and they cannot get through to a human to ask this very basic question, which is this real?
Mm.
Has my delivery really been missed? Where has my packet gone this time? And the experience with the bots not only was frustrating, but also led me down to the path of potentially handing over very sensitive information to scammers and losing all my money. Now, I must say, as a journalist, that is about £5, and they've been some very disappointed scammers. But nevertheless, it could be, it could have been quite dangerous, and potentially dangerous for other people who, like I say, aren't as savvy or don't, something doesn't kick in their head to go, oh, hang on, this doesn't look quite right.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a combination of bot frustration plus scam is equals ultimate frustration and concern. What about you then? Have you had any particularly bad experiences with bots?
So I have. It's less that I've had any particularly disastrous experiences with bots.
Mm.
It's more that I've never had a good experience with a bot.
Mm.
Certainly, the vast majority of instances where I've kind of been forced to engage with a chatbot, it's just not as efficient as working, as either working from an existing kind of like written kind of FAQ or knowledge base or whatever, or just as you say, talking to an actual person. Because the problem with bots is that they're entirely constrained by how their decision tree is formed, and
Mm.
in a lot of cases, they're kind of reliant on the inputs that they're expecting. So, for example, if you aren't wording your queries in the right way, the bot will just have no idea how to process them, which just makes them incredibly frustrating to deal with. It always feels like you're having to jump through these insane hoops to do something that should be relatively straightforward. So whenever there's an option to use an alternative channel, I will always do that rather than interacting with a chatbot, because just don't I don't find them helpful or pleasant to work with.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, actually, so we've had my big slag off of bots at the beginning, and what I don't dislike about them. I have had good experiences with bots. There is one bank in particular that has a really good voice bot, effectively, that can, it really, whatever is going on behind the scenes, it seems to me like some really good natural language processing. It can understand you when you just speak something to it. It will then repeat back to you how it thinks what you have just said fits into its decision tree. And you can say yes or no, that's kind of what I wanted or not what I wanted, and then point you in the direction, typically, however, though, of a person. And I think that that is kind of really important. And when people are thinking about implementing bot, typically channel you towards an actual person who can use their abstract thinking to deal with your request in more detail. And I think this is actually a really important part of how bots should be implemented. We've got plenty of things on the site about it, that bots, they shouldn't be a replacement for humans. They should work alongside humans to take out that middle bit of saying, I want to increase my overdraft, I want to close my account, I want to find out what's happened to my damn parcel. I want to know about this particular thing. That's, to my mind, how bots and automation should work, both customer service bots and, to a great extent, automation in general. See that a lot in cybersecurity, that takes out the kind of basic element of stuff and then flags what's actually important to the IT professional.
Yeah, like taking the grunt work out of log analysis, as we spoke about in a previous episode with eBay Classifieds head of security, James Bino.
Yeah. And that's where it makes sense. It's a bit like driving an automatic car, actually, that, kind of, it takes out the, gear shifting part of it. There are good reasons to have a manual car. You have certain levels of control, but for certain people or for certain situations, it makes more sense to have an automatic than it does to have a manual gearbox. Sorry, car analogy. Sorry to Adam in particular. Sorry, potentially to listeners who don't like my car analogies. I feel at this point that I should say I'm not actually a petrol head. I don't even have a driving license. I just like talking about cars, how they work.
That's ironic, because you're certainly driving me crazy. Hey, here all week. Try the fish. But in terms of chatbots specifically, I think there are, as you say, ways to implement them well to do stuff that kind of doesn't need to be done by a human operator. So in particular, things like security verification and security questions, if you're calling, a utility provider or a bank, for example, having to go through the rigmarole of, what's your postcode, what's the 10th letter of your password, what's your security question, etc., etc. It's much easier to do that with a chatbot than with a human operator, because they can the chatbot can automatically kind of pass that, check it against the database, and return a yes or a no kind of fairly quickly. And also, that is the kind of inputs that chatbots do very well with, because they're very rigidly defined. They're much less open to kind of permutations of language than more kind of general queries.
Also, with many of these, like, your question may terminate in something that the robot can answer as well. Like, what is my current account balance? What is the balance on my most recent bill? That kind of straightforward, single fact answer of, that's not going to require any sort of abstract or lateral thinking. Your balance is going to be whatever it is.
Actually, I've just thought of the worst experience that I've had with.
I've triggered a memory.
Bots. You have. You've triggered a deeply repressed memory. It's the calls that our listeners may well be familiar with, where it's frequently about a car accident that wasn't your fault, or similar flavor of scam. But it's the ones that are automated recordings, but that have the little psychological hooks to try and convince you that it's actually a real person.
Okay.
So they'll frequently pause for a second. So you'll pick up the phone and there'll be a brief pause, and then the recording will go, hello, like it's kind of not quite hearing you, and then launch into the spiel to make it seem like it's a real actual person on the other end of the phone. And cards on the table, I've never listened to it through for long enough to determine how much interaction there is with it, whether or not it has the same kind of
Mm.
decision tree functionality as you'd get with kind of like an automated receptionist kind of thing. But I'm 90% sure that that uses kind of chatbot style technology in order to power it.
Yes, so I have sat through them long enough because my hobby at the moment, especially during lockdown, because it's hard to do hobbies and, there's only so much crochet that can be done in the world, is to sit through all these and speak to scammers on my home phone and stuff and lead them on a merry dance.
Oh, that's
Um,
always fun.
yeah, kind of especially it's like, I'm in the car, I'm not really doing anything else. I'm not
Mm.
driving. Nothing else requires my attention. Yeah, I'll mess around with them. And they do. It's good, but you can trip them up a bit because they'll be like, like you say, hello to elicit like a fake conversation.
Mm.
And, they'll say, oh, I've gotten a record that you were in a car crash that wasn't your fault. Is that correct? But what it's listening for is either yes or no.
Yes.
If you say anything other than yes or no, it will think quite often that you have said yes
Mm.
and just kind of pass you on because no is no. And if you say
Mm.
no, it'll just cut you off. But yes, you could say yes or oh yeah, I did. Or actually yes, or that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
anything that is longer than no, it takes as yes and passes you on to sample or operative, whose time I then waste. So, um, so yeah, they do seem to be using largely the same kind of decision tree, although much shorter.
So yeah, that is far and away my biggest annoyance. And it's not even that the calls themselves are a nuisance. I resent being tricked by them, or I resent the attempt to trick me into kind of participating in this charade.
Without wishing to head too far down the road of linguistics, it is one of those things. It's kind of interesting. The theory that you can only have a conversation if there are two interlocutors. So there are two people or more speaking. That's what constitutes a conversation. If one person is speaking, then there isn't a conversation happening. But I think with chatbots, there kind of is, even if you're not, actually speaking to a person, even if they're kind of running along pre-programmed rails. But yeah, a lot of work, whether on scam bots or legit bots or whatever, is put into making them conversational, to making you feel like you are speaking to a person, whether
Mm.
that is just the way that they are. Some of them are like, "Oh, hello, I'm Rachel." It's like, no, you're not.
I was like, no, you're not. I
You're a
don't believe
robot.
you.
Yeah, largely kind of like like I say, some of them are very honest, like, "Hello, I am a robot." There's a lot of effort put into that side of it, which it is all quite impressive.
It is impressive, but how worthwhile is all of that effort? Kind of, is there much appeal in making a chatbot appear human? Because personally, I find it really disingenuous when
Mm.
chatbots kind of try and appear like a real person, particularly when they try and be chummy. I find that really aggravating.
I'm sure there is some kind of psychological theory or whatever that goes on behind the scenes of perhaps even getting you to engage more with the bot before you're like, I want to speak to a human. To get you to be a bit more at ease with it, that kind of thing.
It has the opposite effect, though, because, on the rare occasions when I do have to interact with a chatbot or an automated service or something like that,
Mm.
what I want is I want to go down the decision tree as quickly and efficiently as possible so I can get what I want to do done in the shortest possible time. I mean, the benefit of chatbots is that they're faster and more efficient than talking to a human. That advantage gets removed if I have to sit through, this pointless preamble of, hi, I hope you're having a super awesome day. My name's Botty, the chatbot, and I'm here to help you get what you want to do. We're going to have a great time once you listen to these options. Like, shut up. Just give me the options, for God's sake.
This is the same Adam, listeners, who at the beginning of this episode was saying that mild frustration was his worst experience. But as far as I can tell, Adam, actually, I've experienced either end of the spectrum, and I'm generally kind of like fine with them. You, on the other hand, you are the one who is prejudiced against the robots.
Yeah, I think I'm just slowly uncovering my hidden anti-robot prejudice.
I knew it. I always knew you were like that. Come the robot revolution, I will be, a happy surf, and you will be landfill.
Although, weirdly, having said that, I do find myself reacting much more positively to that kind of behavior and that kind of anthropomorphization in more sophisticated software like, the Google Assistant or Alexa or whatever. I find myself reflexively saying things like please and thank you to them. And I couldn't tell you precisely why that is, aside from the fact that they're just better. They're better at doing what I want them to do. They're more efficient by and large. So maybe it's just that I feel they're more worthy of my kind of politeness and respect than kind of traditional chatbots. They also don't kind of put it on quite as thickly as some.
They also, live in your house and you paid for them. So there's probably that element of it as well, that you're somewhat invested. But yeah, I have occasionally said thank you to mine, but I generally find them opposite to you. I find them kind of stupid. And the fact that they don't tend to have any kind of like memory, really. You can't follow one question or request on from the previous one because
You
they're
can actually.
like, Guy Pearce in Memento. Oh, can
No,
you?
you can. You can.
It depends. It must depend on the request.
Yeah, it depends on the request, and it depends on the kind of what the request is. So they are getting more sophisticated. So you can ask things like, "Where is the nearest post office?" and then follow it up with, "What time does it close?" Rather than saying, "Where's the nearest post office? What time does that specific post office close?"
But yeah, I've just always found them slightly frustrating. Like I say, they're like Guy Pearce in Memento, but worse. Like even worse, short-term memory problems, which is saying something, really, isn't it? But I think that we've hit on a couple of times something important here, which is the other frustrating aspects of bots. Just part of the fact that it's fairly new technology. So weirdly, this conversation has had me thinking about Clippy, the bane
The much
of
maligned Clippy.
yeah, poor Clippy. But kind of a proto chatbot. Are you trying to do X, Y,
Absolutely.
Z? Do you need my help?
Mm,
Clippy was around in the 90s,
mm.
but
Do you know what? I
you
still
know
maintain that the biggest mistake Microsoft made was not introducing Cortana as Clippy. Clippy 2.0. I think Cortana would have got
yeah,
a much better reception if it was, packaged as a new and improved version of Clippy.
it would have certainly got more memes. I'm not sure about kind of uptake and acceptance. The question for me then is the problem with chatbots, the frustrations that we feel, the snags that there are, is this because it is a new technology, especially in terms of like widespread use? I think it really has been around for a couple of years in terms of finding it everywhere.
Mm.
Is that the problem? And as time goes on, bots generally will become more and more like the best interactions we have had and better, or not really. I mean, could you and I sit down in our dotage and be like, these bots are rubbish? One comes over and it's all like, what would you like to drink today? You go, oh, I don't know. Do you know what? I really fancy some peppermint tea. I'm sorry, I don't understand that response.
I think that bots are going to kind of settle into a much smaller niche than they currently occupy. I think bots are very new and shiny in terms of customer interaction models and customer service
Mm.
tools. I think they're being deployed a lot more widely than is strictly necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over time they will be scaled back to the kind of applications that we've talked about. Stuff like security verification, stuff like reservation booking, for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Or checking.
or checking. Google's duplex service is actually a really good example of essentially a chatbot that works the other way, a chatbot that makes calls on your behalf to things like restaurants or hotels and whatnot to make reservations by going down a decision tree based on the input that you programmed. And I think that's a really interesting use case that I can see becoming more popular as time goes on.
Yeah, isn't that how it's pitched, as like a virtual butler or virtual concierge, something like that?
Essentially, it's essentially somebody to make boring phone calls on your behalf, because I think we all kind of pretty much hate having to make those kind of phone calls.
Yes, yes, and especially if you get caught with the hold music. Some of them I'm
Mm.
just like, I'm gonna cut off my ears before I actually get through to somebody. Which ironically would mean that I'd need to engage with the online chatbot. Yeah, I agree, and I think that to an extent we see this with any newish technology. That's kind of like apply it to all the
Mm,
things, and
mm,
then you find out that it's a classic. If the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Or if the
mm,
tool that you have most recently received for Christmas is a hammer, you want to bash all the
mm.
nails. And it's that kind of excitement that leads to the
Yes.
application of any technology, whether that is chatbots or anything else, to
Looking at you,
everything.
machine learning.
Yes, yes, indeed. And, then you end up scaling it back because you realize actually it's not appropriate in all contexts.
Yeah, and I think as time goes on, it'll be whittled down to a niche that is smaller than it currently occupies, but which is much more effective.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think also this idea that any kind of automation or AI should work alongside humans
Mm,
will become more prevalent as well, as we are seeing in areas that were earlier adopters of this kind of technology. The acknowledgement that actually you do still need humans to
yeah.
do the abstract part of it.
Well, on that note, that's all we have time for this week.
You can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes, and even more on our website, www.itpro.co.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter at ITPro, as well as on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro Podcast wherever you find podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review.
We'll be back next week with more analysis from the world of IT. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.